It was a quiet evening when I found myself standing at the edge of a new beginning, staring into the mirror. My reflection felt like a stranger one I had long ago abandoned in the quest to be what others expected me to be. I had spent years trying to fit into a mold, suppressing parts of myself that felt too wild, too bold, too unapologetically me. But there was always something missing, something deep inside that I couldn't quite reach. No matter how hard I tried to be the woman the world wanted. It was then that I stumbled upon Carl Jung's theories, his insights into the individuation process, the journey towards self-realization. He spoke of the unconscious, of the shadow that lurks within, holding all the pieces of ourselves we've neglected or rejected. And in that shadow, I began to see the faintest glimmer of something powerful and ancient energy I had once been told to ignore. My inner goddess was buried beneath layers of fear, doubt, and societal expectations, but she was there. Jung's words echoed in my mind. To be whole, we must embrace both light and shadow. For years, I had been fighting against my own darkness, afraid of what it might reveal. But now, I realized that it was time to confront it, to face the fears that had kept me small and uncertain. I wasn't just a collection of fears and flaws. I was a woman capable of reclaiming her power, of stepping into her true essence. This was not just about breaking free from societal expectations. It was about finding my truest self and embracing the fullness of who I was meant to be. And as I embarked on this journey of self-discovery, I knew I was no longer searching for approval from the outside world. My happiness, my confidence, and my strength had always been within me, waiting to be awakened. My name is Clara, and for most of my life, I lived in the shadows of others' expectations. I was the kind of woman who always tried to please, always tried to fit in, to be liked, to be seen as enough. The years passed, and I found myself carrying a heavy weight, one that didn't belong to me, but to the roles I had been taught to play. But something inside me, something deep and untapped, began to stir as I reached my 60s. I realized I had spent so much time looking for validation from the world that I had lost sight of the one person whose approval mattered most, myself. As I ventured deeper into the teachings of Carl Jung, I began to see the truth in his words. The journey of individuation is not just for the young, nor is it bound by age. The path toward reclaiming one's true self doesn't stop when you reach a certain number of years. It becomes even more important for women like me, those over 60, who have spent decades suppressing parts of themselves. It is crucial to understand that our power doesn't diminish with age. Instead, it deepens. The strength we carry is not about the way we look or the roles we've played, but about the wisdom we've gathered and the courage we've yet to embrace. I remember the first time I dared to look into my own eyes without fear of judgment. It was as if a veil had lifted, and for the first time in years, I saw myself clearly. I saw a woman who had survived, who had loved, who had given so much of herself. But I also saw a woman who was now ready to reclaim her power, to let go of the need for others' approval, and to step into the full glory of her own being. This journey wasn't easy, and there were moments when the weight of societal expectations felt suffocating. But as I continued on this path, I felt something shift within me. I was no longer seeking validation from others. I was learning to listen to my own voice, to trust my intuition, and to embrace the incredible strength that comes with owning who I truly am, finally and completely. As I continued my journey, something shifted within me. It was as if I had reached a point where the person I had been trying to please for so long, the woman everyone expected me to be, no longer existed. She had faded away, leaving behind someone unfamiliar, yet incredibly powerful. It was Clara, not the woman who had followed the rules for fear of rejection, but the woman who was beginning to uncover her truth, piece by piece. And in that moment, I realized that the only way forward was to embrace everything I had been avoiding for so long, my shadow. Carl Jung's concept of the shadow resonated deeply with me. It wasn't a foreign enemy to fight against, but a part of me I had ignored, rejected, or even feared. For years, I had pushed aside the darker, more complex aspects of myself, the anger I had buried, the frustrations I had never expressed, the vulnerability I had kept hidden. In the pursuit of being the woman everyone admired, I had left behind parts of my soul that were longing to be seen and heard. Jung believed that the path to individuation, to becoming the whole, authentic self, required facing the shadow, not rejecting it. At first, I was terrified. The thought of confronting my fears, my insecurities, and the parts of myself I had never fully accepted felt overwhelming. But the more I explored this journey, the more I began to see that my shadow wasn't something to fear, it was something to embrace. Those feelings of guilt, anger, and even shame were not weaknesses, but parts of my life that had shaped me, parts of my power that I had been too afraid to recognize. With each step, I started to peel back the layers of fear that had once held me captive. I allowed myself to feel the full spectrum of emotions, from sadness to rage to profound joy, without apologizing for them. I began to let go of the need for external validation. The more I accepted myself flaws, mistakes, and all the more whole I felt. It was like breathing for the first time after years of holding my breath, and as I did, I noticed a profound shift within me. The chains of societal expectations began to loosen. I was no longer bound by the fear of not being enough, of not meeting the standards others had set for me. Instead, I was becoming a woman who knew her worth, who had faced her darkest fears and emerged stronger, more complete. I was learning to trust myself in ways I had never imagined, listening to my intuition and embracing the journey with open arms, ready to step fully into the person I was always meant to be. The process of individuation wasn't a one-time event, it was a continuous unfolding, a daily practice of self-acceptance, and an ongoing dance with the parts of myself I had once ignored. Now, I could finally say I was whole. As I continued to embrace the process of self-discovery, I began to realize something profound. My journey wasn't just about shedding the layers of fear and societal expectations. It was about reclaiming something even more powerful, my inner goddess. This wasn't a mystical figure I had read about in books or seen in old myths, but a very real part of me, buried deep beneath years of conditioning. It was a force I had once been taught to suppress, the wild, untamed energy of my feminine essence that had long been hidden behind the masks of compliance, expectation, and perfection. At first, I didn't even know where to begin. How could I possibly access something so deeply rooted in me when society had spent so many years telling me that my value lay in being docile, agreeable, and pleasing to others? But as I let go of those external pressures, I began to feel a stirring within me, a sense of power that had always been there, just waiting for me to acknowledge it. I started to understand that this inner goddess wasn't about outward beauty or fragility, but about the authenticity and strength that comes with owning who I truly am. Through Jung's teachings, I realized that this power was not something that could be easily defined or confined. It was an energy that transcended external appearances or societal expectations. My inner goddess wasn't just about being gentle or nurturing, she was fierce, creative, and full of wisdom. She was the part of me that could create, transform, and lead with confidence, without fear of judgment or rejection. I began to connect with this deeper part of myself in small but powerful ways. I listened to my body more, honoring its rhythms and needs. I stopped apologizing for my desires, my dreams, and my voice. I allowed myself to be bold, to speak my truth, even if it made others uncomfortable. And as I did, I began to see the changes in myself. I felt more alive, more attuned to the natural flow of my life, no longer confined by the rigid molds I had once believed I had to fit into. Clara was no longer the woman who lived in the shadows of others' expectations. She had found the strength to step into the fullness of her being, to embrace the power of her inner goddess, and to live in alignment with her true self. It wasn't always easy, and there were moments of doubt, but each step brought me closer to the woman I was always meant to be: free, powerful, and unapologetically authentic. In reclaiming my inner goddess, I had finally found the freedom I had been searching for all along. As I continued this journey of self-discovery, I came to a pivotal realization. Healing was not about becoming perfect, but about embracing my imperfections. The more I ventured into the depths of my own soul, the more I was forced to confront the parts of myself I had long buried, the parts I feared, the parts I hated, and the parts I had tried so desperately to hide from the world. But Carl Jung had taught me that the shadow isn't an enemy to be vanquished. It's a part of me that needs to be accepted and integrated. The fear I had carried for so long, the fear of failure, rejection, and judgment, was rooted in my own refusal to face the darkness within. It was painful at first. Every time I dared to look at those hidden parts of myself, those moments of weakness, regret, and anger, I felt a sharp sting. The woman I had spent so many years pretending to be didn't want to face the truth. But slowly, with time, I realized that the path to true healing wasn't about running from these feelings. It was about walking directly into them, understanding them, and allowing them to transform me. There were days when the weight of it all felt too much to bear. I was afraid of what I might find, afraid that I wasn't strong enough to face the pain I had spent so many years avoiding. But each time I faced a new layer of my shadow, something within me shifted. I started to forgive myself for past mistakes, to let go of the guilt that had held me prisoner for so long. I stopped seeing myself as a failure or as incomplete. I began to see that my imperfections were not weaknesses, but integral parts of who I was: a woman who had lived, loved, and learned through her experiences. Healing, I learned, is a continuous process. It doesn't happen overnight, but with each step I took, I felt myself becoming stronger, more whole, more at peace with who I truly am. It was a journey that required courage, but it was also one that brought me closer to the woman I had always been meant to be. If you're on a similar journey of self-discovery and healing, I invite you to subscribe to my channel. Together, we'll explore these deep truths about ourselves, confront our shadows, and embrace the authentic, powerful beings we are meant to be. Join me, and let's walk this path of transformation together. As the days turned into months, Clara, began to feel a lightness I hadn't known in decades. It was subtle at first, like the slow warming of the earth after a long winter. But the more I embraced my shadows, my story, and my essence, the more I began to feel something truly radical: freedom. Not the kind of freedom that comes from external changes: no new job, no fresh start in another city, no applause from others. This was an inner freedom, a freedom that blossomed quietly the moment I realized I didn't need to prove myself anymore. I didn't need to be agreeable all the time. I didn't need to be admired, validated, or chosen to feel worthy. That realization changed everything. Carl Jung's teachings had guided me to this truth. Happiness and safety don't come from being accepted by others. They arise when we learn to accept ourselves completely, lovingly, and without condition. For the first time in my life, I gave myself full permission to be me. Not just the polished, presentable version of Clara, but the whole, vibrant, deeply feeling, occasionally messy woman I truly was. I stopped shrinking myself to fit into roles that no longer served me. I stopped apologizing for taking up space. And in that newfound spaciousness, I found joy, real joy, the kind that doesn't depend on whether someone else approves of me or whether I've checked all the boxes. It was the kind of happiness that bubbles up unexpectedly during a quiet walk, or while sitting alone with a cup of tea, simply feeling at peace. I used to believe that happiness would come once I achieved something, once I became something, but I was wrong. Happiness came when I remembered who I already was, when I chose to befriend myself, when I stopped running. This inner security has become the foundation of my life. It's not that I don't have fears or doubts anymore, I do, but they no longer control me. They don't define me. I know who I am now, and I no longer ask the world for permission to feel whole. If this message speaks to your heart, don't walk this path alone. Subscribe to my channel and join a growing community of women who are reclaiming their power, rewriting their stories, and learning to love themselves fully and freely. Your journey begins with you. Let's rise together. As I settled more fully into this new version of myself, Clara, came to understand something I hadn't expected. Transformation doesn't have to be a solitary path. For so long, I thought healing was something I had to do alone, behind closed doors, in silence. But as I opened myself up, truly opened, I began to feel the pull of something deeper, something collective. I started to notice that other women were walking this path too, in their own ways, with their own stories, shadows, and longings. And slowly, a beautiful truth emerged. We need each other. There is something extraordinary that happens when women come together, not to compete or compare, but to connect, to share wisdom, to hold space for each other's pain and joy, to listen without judgment and speak without fear. In the presence of women who are also shedding expectations, embracing their shadows, and reclaiming their power, I felt seen in a way I never had before. These connections weren't built on small talk or surface-level smiles. They were forged in vulnerability, in the brave act of saying, "Me too," when someone shared their deepest fear, in the quiet strength of holding someone's story with compassion, in the sacred exchange of truth between women who were no longer trying to fit into a mold, but instead breaking it together. Through this community, I felt my growth accelerate. I found myself inspired by the courage of others, uplifted by their insights, and deeply moved by their resilience. We were mirrors for each other, reflecting back strength, reminding one another that we were never truly alone in this process. There's a kind of magic in sisterhood that awakens something ancient and fierce in us. It reminds us that while the journey inward is personal, the path becomes more powerful when walked together. So if you're longing for that connection, if you're walking your own path of rediscovery and healing, I invite you to join us. Subscribe to my channel, not just for the stories, but for the sisterhood. Let's build a space where we rise together, where our shared journey becomes a source of collective power. You are not alone, and your story matters here. The journey Clara embarked on serves as a powerful reminder that true happiness and freedom come from within. It's not about seeking approval or validation from others, but learning to embrace and love ourselves, flaws and all. Through Clara's story, we see that healing isn't a quick fix. It's a continuous process of confronting our fears, embracing our shadows, and reclaiming our power. For women, especially those over 60, the process of individuation, understanding, and integrating all parts of oneself is key to becoming whole and finding inner peace. We don't need to fit into society's mold or live by someone else's rules. When we connect with ourselves and with other women who are on the same path, we tap into a collective strength that lifts us all. So, let Clara's story inspire you to step into your own power, to heal, and to embrace the woman you are becoming. If Clara's journey resonates with you, I encourage you to like this video and subscribe to Senior Moments Matt. Share your thoughts and feelings about the story in the comments, and feel free to ask any questions or share your personal experiences. Let's continue this conversation together.